Saving the Barbados economy from disaster, Prime Minister Mia Mottley faces her biggest test yet. Weekend Business Report starts right now. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Kenil Gale. Thanks for joining us this week. Barbados is turning to the International Monetary Fund (IMF) for help after Prime Minister Mia Mottley revealed that the economy was in pretty bad shape. We're linking with Barbados in a bit to take a closer look. But right now, here are some of the top news stories BATV brought you this week. Schools across Jamaica will now have to provide healthier drinks for students as the Health Ministry plans to slap a ban on sugary drinks in schools. Sashana Small tells us more.
Our next generation, our children, are suffering from an obesity epidemic, which is going to lead to significant health effects later on at our expense, but also at their and their families' expense and the future of the country's expense. And we need to do something about it, Mr. Speaker, and do something about it now.
Dr. Tufton said the ban will take effect in January 2019, when the government will implement a policy to restrict certain types of sugary drinks in schools.
Effective January 2018, giving ample notice, the government will implement a policy to restrict 2019, the government will implement a policy to restrict certain types of sugary drinks in schools. By sugary drinks, we mean beverages that contain sugar or syrup that is added by the manufacturer, Mr. Speaker. It does not include, Mr. Speaker, 100% juice or unsweetened milk.
The health minister argued that the ban is necessary as the government increases efforts to reduce the incidences of non-communicable diseases in Jamaica.
Approximately 70% of Jamaican children consume one or more sugar-sweetened beverage per day, and 77% of our adults are as guilty or worse. They are the ones setting the example for our children. This, Mr. Speaker, is a serious problem. Consumption of one or more servings of sugar-sweetened beverages per day is associated with a 26% greater risk of developing type 2 diabetes. These are the facts, Mr. Speaker.
He notes that the Health Ministry, as well as the Education Ministry, will be meeting with manufacturers to discuss the policy before it is implemented.
So, Mr. Speaker, starting next week, we will meet with the manufacturers. We will explain what these guidelines mean in terms of what is a per serving allowed amount in terms of those drinks that are available. And they will have to conform to those guidelines, reformulate products, use existing products that may be available, use local products, but effective January 2019, sugary drink will be restricted as part of the response to the obesity crisis in our school system.
In the meantime, Dr. Tufton says his ministry is finalizing plans for a nutrition policy in the school system that will govern what students consume.
Mr. Speaker, the school standards will focus not just on sugar, but on reducing the intake of saturated fats, cholesterol, sodium, and sugar, and increasing vegetable and fruit consumption. And I hear the member about local consumption. That's going to be a critical part. That combined with the Jamaica Moves in School and the messaging around that, Mr. Speaker, will be a new frontier for public health to get our young people to change their behavior and change their habits, because they are indeed drinking and eating themselves sick.
The government says it will continue to lobby the U.S. to cushion the possible effects of sanctions against Russian oligarchs on workers at the Windalco plant in St. Catherine. Jamila Maitland reports.
Though the applications of the sanctions have been delayed, Minister Montague said the livelihood of the Windalco plant workers and their dependents may still be threatened.
We have had a series of consultations amongst our stakeholders with three principles in mind: protecting the workers' jobs, protecting our environment, and safeguarding our economy. We have kept the lines of communications open to all stakeholders as we seek to find a solution.
The minister explained that the U.S. government has since frozen the accounts of UC Rizal in the U.S. and could pose sanctions on any country that attempts to make transactions on their behalf. That is why he says the government is lobbying to have Jamaica exempted.
We have established a task force comprising the Ministry of Mining, Finance, Foreign Affairs, the AG's chambers, the Jamaica Bauxite Institute, and others. This task force is looking at all options and possibilities. We are consulting with the U.S. government, the Russian embassy, and the UC Roussel. We will update the country more fulsomely very soon. Discussions, Mr. Speaker, are at a delicate stage. We are aware of some of the challenges, but we cannot yet show our full hand.
It has already been reported that some workers have received delayed payments, while some only receiving a portion of their pay since the announcement. Meanwhile, Minister Montague reminded Parliament that the event is unprecedented, but the Holness administration is working to find a sustainable solution.
Let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker. This crisis was not of our own making, but we will rise to the challenge. We will abide by the sanctions, but we will show respect and patience to our Russian friends and investors. The United States has been our best and largest trading and development partner. We value that. Equally, Jamaica is a sovereign nation and has a role to play on the world stage. We will therefore continue to lead the way in finding suitable accommodation to all the interests in this matter. Let there be no doubt that even as we work to acknowledge, accommodate, and respect all, our principled position is that we will put Jamaica first.
Moving on now, the Barbados economy is experiencing some difficult times, and the new administration is doing all it can to get things back on track. Joining me now to talk a little bit more about this is lecturer in banking and finance at the UWI Caville campus in Barbados, Jeremy Stephen. Welcome to Weekend Business Report, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm well, man. Thanks for asking.
Great. Let's start by talking a little bit about the economy. So how bad is the economic situation in Barbados?
It can be rather, or viewed as to be rather precarious at this time. It's not as bad as most people may make it out to be, but it definitely could be way better given our standards and the kind of economy we've tried to run for many years.
Was going to the IMF Prime Minister Motley's best move?
Well, Barbados thought for a while that the IMF intervention should have been necessary. I would say that if it were that she had other opportunities to finance or to replace the foreign debt that we have, that you might not have needed the IMF this year per se, but eventually you would have needed the IMF. But since she did default on foreign loans last week, Thursday, defaulted very seriously, it's a selective default, one would think that the IMF being here, or rather taking a serious interest in what is going on in Barbados and providing the balance of payment support, send a signal to investors that it might be business as usual, but things may improve in the near term.
Now, Jeremy, international ratings agency Standard & Poor's has lowered Barbados' long-term foreign currency rating to selective default, and there's also been a downgrading by regional rating agency CARICRIS. So how much do you think this will impact the island's recovery?
Well, CARICRIS's downgrade doesn't necessarily impact us because I think only very few regional financial firms take CARICRIS's rating seriously, but it's very indicative of what other ratings agencies such as Standard & Poor's and Moody's would seek to go about with. And the sad thing is that Barbados' economy depends rather heavily on foreign direct investment, probably more so than even Jamaica's. And it will impact at least the competitiveness that we do have in the industry, particularly since we've been losing that competitiveness in international business and attracting foreign direct investment for about 7 years or so now. So I imagine that, with that downgrade, it's going to put us on the back foot, and it's going to really be important for the Prime Minister on Monday when we have our budget to really explain to foreign investors why she had to do what she had to do, and then explain to persons locally why she had to do what she had to do as well.
Should Bajans be bracing for hard times or possibly austerity measures?
Pretty much. I think that we should be really expecting austerity very, very soon. Once the IMF is involved and you are seriously engaging the IMF, you will have to expect some form of austerity. The question is, what will the IMF be able to negotiate with the government in terms of that austerity package. There's a lot of talk floating around surrounding that the BLP and the Prime Minister will have to probably go back on a lot of their election promises, such as raising non-contributory pensions and contributory pensions, free tertiary education, although she has seemingly committed to doing that, and also raising civil servant salaries, although she seems to have seriously committed to doing that as well, to the tune of an adjustment of 4.5%. So I would hope that the IMF's recommendations are taken very seriously in light of what's going on, and that, as the Prime Minister has been trying her best to create this environment of solidarity, that we, the people, recognize that, well, we've allowed the situation to fester for far too long, and that those who are vulnerable are protected, but those who can afford to pay will pay and do it for the country. That's my hope.
Finally, Jeremy, outside of balance of payment support from the IMF and the debt restructuring, what do you think are some of the other options for the Mia Mottley administration to help revive the economy?
Well, those options really stem from how they manage their fiscal expenditure. The IMF does recommend, and we economists, the Barbados Economic Society and whatnot, have really expressed our reluctance to see government expenditure and wastage grow over the next few years. That expenditure, or sustaining that high level of expenditure, that very high level of expenditure, has really been problematic for the country. It's produced a lot of money printing. The central bank has had to finance government expenditure, and it's not really done anything good by the way of our economy, and it's placed our dollar under continual threat of devaluation. And Barbados' economy is structured on a very stable currency. If that goes, the Barbados economy can't go. So that's a last resort, an absolute last resort. But government must really deal with expenditure. They don't have any leverage when it comes to increasing taxation. They may be able to spread the taxation much wider so they can collect more efficiently, but they can't introduce any more new taxes without the economy stagnating for much longer. Further to that, or in addition, you have to become more focused, say, in a year or two, on growth initiatives outlined by the government as per the blue economy. They're looking at that very seriously, so logistics and international transport. And you have to actually focus again on our international business industry and trying to get that to drive foreign exchange creation and also jobs. There are many other recommendations, but those are the more saleable ones in the short run as well.
Jeremy, Stephen, thanks so much for joining us here on Weekend Business Report. We'll definitely be following this up and checking in with you from time to time. Company news comes up next, then later. Selling e-waste on the black market. We'll tell you why some of Europe's electronic waste is ending up in Africa. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Here's this week's company news.
Sagicor says it has met all contractual requirements to combine its tourism assets with Nasdaq-listed company Playa Hotels and Resorts. The deal is worth approximately 39 billion Jamaican dollars. In keeping with the terms of the transaction, Jewel Resorts and Hilton Rose Hall Resort and Spa employees will be placed on new employment contracts with Playa effective June 1st. Playa is expected to invest over $200 million to build 760 additional rooms in Jamaica over the next 3 years. The Sagicor entities and their stakeholders are now expected to benefit from an expanded presence in resort markets in Mexico, the Dominican Republic and Jamaica, as well as being invested in a listed entity on the Nasdaq. CAC 2000, Jamaica's largest provider of air conditioning equipment, is planning to move into new markets and product offerings. CAC 2000 says despite being Jamaica's largest local provider of air conditioning equipment and technical services, it is looking to expand its service offerings. The plan is to establish various partnerships in a bid to offer a one-stop shop for customers. The company is also looking to move into other areas such as energy to increase savings for customers. The RJ Gleaner Communications Group described financial year 2017-2018, which ended on March 31, as one of strategic investments in high-value equipment, training and initiatives to underpin future growth. The group says its performance was greatly impacted by a drop in revenues of almost $183 million. Meanwhile, for this financial year, the RJ Gleaner Communications Group says it's confident that in pursuing different strategies and taking other appropriate action, it will see long-term sustainability of the business.
Let's now take a look at the closing numbers from the major stock markets around the world. When we come back, more of the top news stories BATV brought you this week, so stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. More news now. Almost 2 million tourists visited Jamaica in the first 5 months of 2018. This has Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett confident of breaking last year's record of 4.3 million visitors. Nordia Francis Williams has more.
The Tourism Ministry says Jamaica's tourism performance has hit yet another record, with stopover arrivals for the first 5 months of the year surpassing 1 million. The island registered some 1,025,997 stopover tourists during the January to May period, representing a 5.5% increase over the same period last year. Cruise arrivals also increased, recording a 5.5% jump for the same period. That brought the total visitor arrival figure to a record-breaking almost 2 million. Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett points out that having 1 million stopover tourist arrivals for the first 5 months of the year is unprecedented. He notes that these provisional estimates mean that over 52,000 more tourists arrived in Jamaica in the first 5 months of 2018 than the comparable period in 2017. He says it also means that Jamaica is on track to welcoming at least 4.6 million visitors for 2018, which is yet another record. He also points out that of note is the significant increase in foreign exchange earnings for the period, which increased by 9% and stood at $1.3 billion, up from $1.2 billion last year. Record tourist arrivals of 4.3 million in 2017 represented a 12.1% increase in arrivals over 2016 and made it the first time that Jamaica increased overall visitor arrivals by 500,000 in a single calendar year. This figure comprised approximately 2.35 million stopover arrivals and 1.95 million cruise passengers. Revenue flows grew from $2.5 billion in 2016 to a record revenue flow of approximately $3 billion. Meanwhile, the Tourism Ministry says the drive to increase tourist arrivals and revenue falls in line with its 5x5x5 growth agenda, which aims to attract 5 million tourists by 2021. Generate $5 billion in earnings, increase total direct jobs to 125,000 and add 15,000 rooms.
The Public Administration and Appropriations Committee PAAC meeting on Wednesday took a different turn after Chairman Dr. Wickham McNeil began questioning the Permanent Secretary in the Tourism Ministry about hiring policy. Jamila Maitland tells us more.
The chairman, who is also the former Minister of Tourism during the last Portia Simpson Miller administration, questioned whether the ministry has changed its policy since he demitted office.
I see online something that has come up. And why it becomes a problem, Minister, is that you would know, just on the list of persons who are now hired at the Tourism Product Development Company.
Chairman, I will finish with the road, sir.
President of G2K, Stephen Edwards. You have Tora Hamilton, who's the legal advisor,
Chairman.
Advisor on gender affairs.
Chairman.
You have Daryl White-Wrong.
Chairman.
You have Lionel Myrie, who is the former General Secretary. In the ministry, you also have Mr. Wallace, Dr. Wallace beside you, who is a former candidate.
Chairman.
Mr. Seabright, who is a candidate. I'm asking you, Permanent Secretary, have you changed the terms of how you do employment at the ministry?
Chairman, no. Out of order.
PAAC member Fitz-Jackson, who supported the chairman's line of questioning to the permanent secretary, pointed out that government members have been recently opposing questions about the hiring of advisors and consultants.
Anytime one attempts to inquire into anything of the government since the last recent months, there is a big opposition. It is the convention of this committee over the many years that, notwithstanding what is on the order paper of each meeting, on the agenda, there has been a convention here. Whatever is on the agenda and a ministry comes here, the members are given the courtesy of inquiring into any pertinent matters that is of the moment in that ministry. That has been the practice.
Of concern was a $9 million traveling expense given to Delano Seabright, who is an advisor employed in the ministry's Tourism Enhancement Fund. After a long discussion about the chairman's questions and a 10-minute break, it was decided that the permanent secretary and her team will not address the questions as they were not on the agenda. Meanwhile, Permanent Secretary in the Tourism Ministry, Jennifer Griffith, revealed that the ministry has not changed its hiring policy. She's expected to address the PAAC at another sitting soon.
The ministry, and you asked about the ministry's policies. The ministry has not changed its policies nor procedures. It's the same ministry that you left. It's the same ministry that is there today.
Value for money, senior communications strategist employed to the Tourism Enhancement Fund in the Ministry of Tourism, Delano Seabright, says the $8.9 million bill he racked up traveling is money well spent. Here's more.
Delano Seabright used a post on his Facebook page to hit back at Dr. McNeil, saying the concerns raised by the PAAC chairman were unfounded. He argued that the former Minister of Tourism is using his chairmanship of the PAAC to distract from the world-leading performance of Jamaica's tourism ministry and its agencies. Mr. Seabright said through his engagement, Jamaica's tourism product is achieving record growth, with arrivals topping 4.3 million last year. Mr. Seabright, who's aligned with the Jamaica Labour Party, has also called the chairman's actions unprecedented, disgraceful, and a gross abuse of his power. In the meantime, the young professional affiliate of the People's National Party, the Patriots, is calling on the permanent secretary in the tourism ministry to investigate what they call wasteful spending. In a press release, the Patriots said it rejects Mr. Seabright's response that his traveling as communications consultant to the tourism minister Ed Bartlett has brought value to the country. The group noted that according to the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, Mr. Seabright's job description is to guide the minister's communication in the public sphere. The release goes on to say that the Jamaica Tourist Board markets the island and not the communications consultant to the minister. In addition, the Tourism Board spends over $1 million annually through its New York City-based public relations firm, Finn Partners, which handles promotions, crisis management, and other high-level communications on behalf of Jamaica. The group is calling for a probe into the functions of the Jamaica Tourist Board and the communication consultant's role to protect taxpayers' money and prevent the duplication of duties.
When we come back, electronic waste for sale. We'll tell you why Nigeria has become a dumping ground for your discarded gadgets. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. As the world celebrated Environment Day on Wednesday, the problem of electronic waste disposal was of particular concern in Nigeria. More in this report.
In this market in Lagos, containers arrive from the port, officially to unload second-hand goods from foreign countries. The delivery is actually waste that's too expensive to recycle, and it comes from around the world. It's part of the 17,000 tonnes of illegal waste imported each year. Merchants come looking for the best value, buying in bulk without knowing how many devices work. They try to save as many as possible by combining functioning pieces. The rest goes to the neighbouring tip, where hundreds live and work. Each does what they can to extract anything of value left. Televisions are stripped, magnets are used to dig for iron pieces, and cables are burned to extract their copper.
One day, go burn like 300 kilos, 200 kilos. Go salang, it's 1 kilo, 1.15.
It's an extremely dangerous method because it releases numerous toxic substances. This expert says it's a major sanitary crisis.
It's the poor people that go to the dump sites most of the time, but then nobody escapes because during the rainy season, which we are in now, all the leachate from the dump site will go into streams and rivers. The fish you eat, you don't know how much heavy metals or how many pops are in them. So everybody's at risk.
To avoid this environmental catastrophe, the European Union has banned the export of electronic waste to countries that can't treat it. But it's a rule that's far from respected. According to a study, 87% of this immense heap of waste comes from the EU.
And that's our show for this week. On behalf of the entire Weekend Business Report team, I'm Keneal. See you next time.